Let's call our meeting to order. Harry, can you take the roll?
Yes. Ms. Tompkins?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
And Mr. O'Reilly?
Here.
Mr. Evo?
Here.
Mr. Kaplan? Here. Mr. Paschal? He is gone. Mr. Workman is here.
Very good.
And utility staff.
Very good. Mr. Peschel had mentioned at the last meeting he would not be here, so that's excused absent. All right, thank you. Nick, was the meeting appropriately noticed?
Yes, the meeting notice was posted here at the office and also was sent to City Hall and through the library for posting. And we did also send it out to various media outlets.
Thank you. Number 3, the public comment period. At this time, the commission would recognize members of the public who've indicated a desire to address the commission. Do we have any members of the public to address the commission today? Seeing none. Number 4, commissioner and staff comments. Commissioners, any comments before we get going? Any staff comments today?
None for this evening.
None for this evening. Presentation of Commissioner Service Award for Mr. Harry Borgman. Harry, this is your last meeting.
Last one, yes.
Oh, well, congratulations. I'm a little,
Wow.
look at that.
Nice, yes, thank you.
Pretty schnazzy now.
10 years.
Turn and smile for the camera.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's very nice. Nice recognition. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's 10 years, Harry?
10 years, yes. Just getting used to it.
10 years or 2/3 of 2 terms in the new system.
Yes.
Okay,
Number 6, Employee Service Award.
Yes, so tonight we'd like to recognize Cole Eswine for 20 years of service in our electric department. He began his career here at MU back on September 20th of 2004 as an electrical engineering technician. Since then, he's completed a couple different apprenticeship programs for us, and he is currently a power supply technician operator.
All right. And he'll be recognized with everybody during the Employee Appreciation Day.
Yes.
Very good. Number 7, the GLU glue update.
So this is the quarterly update. There's a list in the packet of activities for the past 90 days or so. The main items that I would note are we've had various data requests that we've filed. We've had a couple different metering issues to deal with and work through, and then worked on exploring some different business opportunities during the last 90 days. Any comments or questions you may have?
Comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you. Number 8, Commission Governance Review. We're picking up where we left off, and Nick has provided the edited versions of 1240 and 1251, the 1240 and 1255 that we asked for changes on last time. Those changes reflect what we discussed.
Yep, I think so.
For that, we need a motion to approve these. Do I have a motion to approve these 2? Moved by Nate, second Mike? Sure. Second by Mike. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Those are approved. And we continue on with number 1265, Legal and Regulatory Compliance. Did anybody have any suggestions for changes in this one?
Pretty good to me.
This one looked pretty tight. Number 1275, External Communications. Suggestions for change there? Yes.
Well, maybe this will come up later, but I noticed in our self-evaluation that we had to talk about, do we as a board communicate with our stakeholders? But it seems like here it says that the general manager does that.
Good thing. We should talk about that during our, I think in general, though, this is talking about public statements, like speaking at city council, or if we're talking in front of the press or something like that. great question. Others? Number 1285, investment policy. This one's a little longer and more involved. And I know we spent a lot of time on this one when we last worked on it. But especially for council members looking at it for the first time. Questions, comments, concerns? Anybody else suggestions?
Well, I made a few notes on here.
Great, Harry.
If I can bring those up.
Please.
On the facing page, under policy statement, 2/3 of the way down, we have a reference to investment officers are defined. I would move that up to above prudence and just define investment officers.
You think under prudent, you think there should be a separate section for investment officers between scope and?
Yeah, just the definition. And I'd move that up underneath scope.
So where it says, note, investment officers are defined as a GM and the financial manager, just move that line up ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you, how would you feel if you just took the prudence heading away?
Yeah.
Change that to policy or something? Because it's beyond, it's more than scope, but I get what you're at, that we're addressing two things under the heading of prudence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a comment.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good one. How do we address that we've got two things going on in that section?
Can I give it a third option?
Sure.
Where it says investment officers under number 2, behind that in parentheses, we would say defined as general manager and financial manager. So that's the first reference of it.
Well, it's referenced as number 2 here.
Give that number 2. Right after that, I would have to.
You'd put a separate heading in for investment officers?
No, I would just put investment officers parentheses defined as the general manager and the financial manager.
Is that what you were trying to get at here, or were you trying to get at something else?
Yeah. Shouldn't, I guess my biggest objection was just reference the word note.
Oh, okay.
Just get rid of the note.
Just get rid of the word note and incorporate that into the number 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody agree on that?
Yep.
Nick, would you want to incorporate it into number 1 as well? Because it has investment officers in that as well.
Well, it's not capitalized. Sure.
Maybe you just needed three bullet points. Number 1, 0.5 needs to be investment officers are defined. You referenced multiple suggestions, Harry. Did you have another one on that policy?
That whole policy. Yes, on page 3. Underneath, at the top, underneath 3, there's a paragraph that says, although not technically an investment as defined above, blah, blah, blah. It refers to cash accounts such as checking or savings accounts. I would make that a bullet point 4.
Bullet point 4, cash accounts such as checking or savings.
Yes. And then delete that sentence underneath.
Any pushback on that suggestion?
So this investment policy also includes cash accounts. What is the point of that statement? Just saying that interest-bearing accounts should be?
I think it's saying, so
Just
that's under
suitable
the
investments.
that's under the title of authorized and suitable investments. And I think the thing is, if we're saying, although it's not technically an investment, it also includes cash accounts. Why not just call it an investment?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Then underneath the next paragraph, collateralization. very last sentence in that paragraph says the entire balance at a bank will need to be collateralized. And I would suggest we insert the word uninsured. So it would read the entire uninsured balance at a bank will need to be collateralized.
Makes sense, yeah.
Because there is an insurance portion. You don't need to collateralize it.
That makes sense.
I think that is reasonable, also within Harry's area of expertise, unless there was a reason we didn't do that the first time.
No, I mean, I think it's a good change. I think from a practice standpoint, I think the uninsured amount is the FDIC one, the 250,000.
Yeah.
Our balance fluctuates, as you can imagine, by more than that amount, so we're maintaining a static level or a.
So it's a moot,
Yeah,
it's a moot point.
but it's still, I think it's a good idea though.
I think, it's kind of addressed in the investment policy, which we get to later, that also talks about that we wouldn't do a CD that's larger than the insured amount at a particular bank. Okay, good suggestion, Harry. You're on a roll, keep going.
No, we're good.
Anybody else have suggestions on that one? Nate?
Suggestion and more maybe a personal comment. Would you guys see any conflict with ATC since it's considered an investment, that it doesn't follow the criteria of our investment policy? Or at least maybe include an exclusion to that.
It's a really good point for discussion, because you're right, ATC is an investment, it's a sizable investment.
Nate, are you suggesting the number 5 then in that list to incorporate that investment?
To exclude it from this policy, yeah.
No, under authorized and suitable investments, where we say time deposits, government securities, LGIP, cash, like checking and savings, do we just add ATC?
But then the policy itself, I think, violates the ATC as it's structured. It wouldn't be very liquid, my presumption.
It's not liquid.
And then it wouldn't, it's probably safe, but it's not as safe as a CD probably.
Yeah, when we wrote this investment policy, really we were trying to tackle short-term investments for our cash reserve.
Yeah.
And we didn't specify that, we wrote a global investment policy. So do we need to have a section for short-term versus long-term?
Yeah.
Because in long-term, we don't have to, we can set different liquidity standards, and we can specifically name ETC.
I think that makes more sense, yeah.
And that would fit in the future if we were to, because at one time in the past, the utility owned a share of generating facilities in different places around the state. That would also fall under something like that, which right now, there isn't a place for it.
Makes sense, because the peaking station's investment as well then.
It is, but it's within our own, it's not an outside investment, so to say.
Yeah, that makes sense,
If we
yeah.
bought a share of a generating facility in Illinois, that would be a true investment.
If my memory serves, you're right to question it. I think we had talked about short-term and long-term policies, and at the time, I think we didn't go with a long-term policy because we only had ETC as the only long-term investment. If I remember correctly.
It's possible.
With that noted, is it possible within the investment policy, we could add a section that just says ETC and just defers to the other policy? That way it's identified, but at least.
Because the next policy is investment policy American Transmission.
That makes sense, yeah.
So, and yeah, instead of going long-term, short-term, you just do a carve-out
with that
with
one.
the exception of
Yeah.
that covered by policy 1290.
Mhm.
Yeah, perfect.
Good thought, Nick. That would then require that any long-term investment or non-short-term investment really be addressed on a case-by-case basis, which would require it to come to the commission instead of the investment officers being involved, and I like that better.
Yep, perfect. I like that. That's a good idea.
Are we at 1290 yet?
If there's no other suggestions on 1285, we're gonna turn to 1290. Good one, Nate.
Thank you.
1290 investment policy for American Transmission Company.
I was just going to say that it's a good policy to include in the policy manual. It's well written. And it does indicate that our return on equity with this investment is 1082.
Good.
It's a good investment.
It's down from the 14 it used to be, but it's still good.
I hate to share bad news, but it's actually 10.52, and it is an edit that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
And
Do we need to actually show the number? Actually, I think it is good
That's
for future
fluctuating.
commissions.
yeah, I think that this one was written in a way to be a little bit more descriptive to help with the education and just understanding.
This says a lot in the way of education for new members about the fact that this is a pro rata investment and that we have to keep investing to maintain our share of ATC, which is very important.
Yeah. Maybe just a comment on that 10.82 is just putting a date when that was.
Yes, as of.
Yeah, as of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other comments or suggestions for this one?
Good.
Cash reserve policy, number 1295. A lot of good stuff in this one for education. Yes, Nick?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out a couple of areas. Obviously, if you want to go comments first, that's fine.
No, go ahead.
So the top of the second page talks about the target cash reserve level. So I know there's been a lot of discussion over the time about what our target level is, why it is the way it is, and that's really what's spelling out. We're using the Moody's. They do our ratings, and they have their targets listed within their documentation, and then from that is where we developed our 300-day target cash reserve. So I think that's policy, so that's what we're driving towards. And then on the last page, under the utility restricted funds, Reg 3, I think we have reached our level, the current level, if you will, for our power plant fund, our one maintenance fund. And we're just over 4 million, if I remember correct. And I would suggest that we increase this level to 5 million. It gives us some more room to continue to grow that fund and also recognize the inflation and additional cost that we could experience if one of those events occurred or when the time comes for overhaul.
So there's a reference in here to a 50,000 hour overhaul. Roughly, how many hours do we have?
I don't know if they know that number, Tony, but in reality, it's likely that we will need to do an overhaul due to other reasons other than ours.
Before 50,000.
Yeah, I mean, Tony's team is doing alignments and borescopes, the internal camera, and those, over time will show signs of wear and tear that will require it to be taken out of service and sent to a plant to be refurbished, and it'll likely be much more before the 50,000 hours.
So if, where I was headed with the 50, where are we in the 50,000 is if we expect the maintenance to be 20 million in 50,000, if we're 10,000 in, do we have 20% of 20 million? Yeah, we're right on target for that. If we're 50% of the life of the unit already, we're behind. And if you then add to that, you say it could be earlier. So I think I still would be curious, where are we in the 50,000 hour cycle?
we're not much more than 1,000 hours. However, the big thing
Excellent.
is starts. You know, some of these units actually run like more of a base load operation where they're just on all the time, especially in different countries. But ours is more of 2 to 4 to 6 hour runs. So the number of starts, I mean, basically you're ramping a jet engine up to full throttle and then ramping it down over that course of time. So.
Okay. That being said, I think I would be good with the slower increase to 5 million. If we were to, want to name another cash reserve fund, we've got stuff here like the M1 and the commission designated and stuff like that. First of all, I don't know that we need the commission designated anymore. That's a leftover from the old dividend policy. But what we're going to have a conversation later in this meeting, would we need to revise the policy if we wanted to create an economic development designated fund? And if so, do we want to just throw something in there to the policy that we're going to bring back next time anyway for that? I know some utilities have rate stabilization. Would that be a designated fund? And is this a way that we could save money for a future investment in renewables, or is that something we're really not allowed to do? So kind of a 3-part question.
Well, the economic development structure, obviously we touched this policy, I should say, the commission designated fund, as you mentioned, will touch the dividend policy, which will be next month. So there's some correlation there, and obviously whatever direction the body takes, we could earmark it now, change it later, just remove it. I think my preference would be to either keep commission designated for now or replace it with something else, but if you're gonna replace it with something else, then Patty needs to change out her record keeping and things, so that there's a number of steps that can happen. So I think I would hope that you have certainty as a body to make that step, so I would recommend maybe keeping that for now. The second part, I've already forgot, so I have
Rate stabilization concept.
Yes, unfortunately, we're not able to maintain a rate stabilization fund locally within the utility. That's something we have to work through a joint action agency to maintain.
Okay.
And then the third item I forgot as well.
Whether a cash reserve fund is a mechanism to save toward a future investment like a renewables investment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's nothing, in all of the cash holdings, there's nothing wrong with us providing different types of sub-funds, if you will. Obviously, we would recognize through the policy that would provide you latitude to move or increase less, just as we did with the M1 fund, today, like you said, it's at 20 million. Well, if that event occurred tomorrow, we wouldn't have 20 million in that fund. We would have to obviously take from somewhere else. So I think we can move things, make up those groups. If it's that, if it's lead services, if it's PFAS, if there are other activities or projects we want to go towards.
Okay. You threw out lead services. Would you recommend a designation for lead services? Separate from the mains project?
My pause is just due to the health of the water utility. While it has some funds, it doesn't necessarily have access right now.
Okay.
So it's not, I'm struggling where the.
Couldn't fund it even if we created.
Yeah, where do we get the revenue from?
Because we're kind of doing that already. Anything we got, we're putting into lead services.
All right. Okay.
Okay, if we can go back to the MI maintenance fund.
Yep.
So you were saying the starts is what the problem is, not so much the total hours.
It can be, yes.
Could we put that in there as, because right now that's the only thing that's in here is total hours and spacing everything on that. So maybe to somehow quantify that a little bit, like so many starts over the course of a 10-year time can wear off it. I don't know if you can find that information, but.
I hate to say it doesn't exist, so that's part of it, and the other parts of it are like how you run the engines. So with it being a peaking unit, you can run typically anywhere between 35 and 60 megawatts. We generally stay between 35 and 51 megawatts, but then how quickly you ramp your engines up and down, and not only how quickly you allow it to be ramped up and down, but how often the market actually needs you to ramp it up and down. So there's a lot of variables at play, and some units like where they sort of chase wind. So like if they're installed in a heavily wind-driven grid footprint, their units are ramping constantly up and down every 5 minutes just to make sure that the power is stabilized essentially through that area. Ours is a lot more stable, which does help, but there's no guarantee that, as more and more coal is retired from the area footprint and more renewables move in, that our unit may soon turn to that mode of operation.
So would it be possible maybe to put something in here like normal maintenance that would be anticipated at 50,000 hours is expected at the present, I don't know, somewhere in those two sentences to say we've used less than 1,000 hours, though starting the engine to full capacity can require certain maintenance earlier or something. Like just to have that in there as information, because if you weren't in this meeting, I wouldn't have known that.
But yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think just to dovetail on Tony's comments, just from an operational perspective, we can take a conservative approach. Basically, we try to, what's the word I'm looking for, operate conservatively so that we're not, being aggressive, I guess. We're not hitting it to the floor as fast as we can to, take the engines off, if you will.
On the operating side, we're also trying to be conservative on the financial side and be, in essence, over-reserved over the straight line use of or expected use of the item, because the unforeseen or unexpected could be so big. And maybe the easy way to accomplish both of those things is, at the present rate of less than 1,000 run hours per year, scheduled maintenance would be more than 50 years off. Well, it was 50 years off when I came out of the commission 12 years ago. So it's probably less than 50 years off now. Maybe we reduce that number, and that number, as it gets closer, becomes our number that we use to say, all right, if we're only 10 years away, maybe now we better have a lot more than $5 million in that account.
Yeah.
Tony and I will do some research and talk to the vendors some more, see if there's some updates.
And then if I can just mention the commission designated contributions. I think this is a really valuable fund. And I think the reason is because this is the place where the utility can show its generosity to the community. And I think that's really, really important. I think what we might need to do though is focus a bit and say, this fund, out of these 3 legs of the economic development stool, this fund might be more focused on whether it's place. Because a lot of the things that have been given to have been place things, whether it's Parks and Recs things like that. We did do a scholarship, so that was people, that was education, but I think it's a really, really, really important part of our public-facing, what the public-facing part of the utility is. And so getting rid of that, I think you would be getting rid of something has more value than we realize.
Okay. I only suggested it because the funding mechanism for it went away.
That was my question. Is there any?
Yeah, we don't know.
something funding it?
Correct.
No, we don't. I mean, we have what's in there, but we don't have
There's money
right
that's in there, right?
Yeah.
I agree with Natasha. It's a very important fund, and I think we should keep it up.
All right. I'm not going to push back too hard.
We just have to figure out where the money comes from.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's a fund with money in it,
Yeah.
with a stated purpose that we all agree with. It just doesn't have a funding mechanism for more, and that's fine. We can keep working on that.
Yeah.
All right. Other suggestions? That was the last one. This batch generated more red lights than the others.
Say, Mike, one more comment on actually the previous one.
The previous one, Well, policy?
Yeah, the biggest policy is 1285. Investment policy, the last paragraph on there. Is it necessary? Is that redundant for all policies or no? So just saying that the Marshfield Utilities investment policy shall be adopted by a vote of Marshfield of the Utility Commission, and it should be reviewed as needed, and the Utilities Commission must approve any modifications made. Is that true of all policies?
My guess is that this investment policy predates the governance document, the governance policies, and that's why that language is in there once it did catch.
But it can be removed at this time.
Yeah, because it's covered through the.
Yeah, we had that before we had the commission governance manual.
Okay, that makes sense then, yeah.
Okay, good feedback and discussion tonight on those. Number 9, the strategic plan review.
So yes, we're continuing with the strategic plan review. Last meeting, we set the value and the value statements. Tonight we turn the focus to the objectives, which are the highlighted in yellow for each of the value statements. Welcome thoughts, ideas, and comments.
Just shout about.
And just keep in mind, once you agree on those, then staff will work on making initiatives that are to meet those. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, depending on what we have.
Are there any areas that anybody wants to talk about first, second, or third? Natasha?
So what are our transparent financial materials? Like our financial materials, can the public access them? I'm assuming, I don't know, that's truly a question.
Yeah, I mean, we're governed by, records, open meetings, so anything that, if someone wants it from the public, they would just reach out and provide them that information.
Okay.
I think the framework behind that was also just the transparency to the common council, giving them the information as well.
Under customer relationships, the second one, or participate in events, education opportunities, and features. What do we consider a feature? Or how would we explain that?
Looking to the experts.
I know, I don't remember when we originally said that.
I don't remember that either. But it just kind of struck me. I assume that kind of almost relates to like supporting the community, but it just didn't, I wasn't quite sure what we intended.
Would it be easier to understand if features was campaigns?
Campaigns?
Not political.
Well, I was gonna say, what kind of campaigns did you have?
Marketing campaigns comes to mind first, but I mean, community outreach campaigns.
Community outreach campaigns maybe would be a better way. It just seemed like that word struck me as, I couldn't figure out what we had intended.
I don't remember.
Well, if we don't know, we should strike it.
Yeah. If we come up with a better one, we'll,
Yeah.
Moves the and to events and educational opportunities, but it does feel like something's missing there.
Or projects? Is that a word? I don't know.
Outreach, outreach is already in there. Never mind.
Yeah. No.
You can just leave it at that, participate in community outreach.
That would work.
Yeah, that would work too. And we aren't leaving anything out, we keep it general, yeah.
Consensus to switch to participate in community outreach? Sounds like consensus.
Can someone explain what the second bullet point is for environmental stewardship? And I think it's missing a word too, but maybe explain it first.
Well, I think some of the activities that roll into that are wetland protection activities, where we purchase land to proactively protect the community environments of the water. I think the promote is somewhat through some of our efforts to do lights, compact fluorescent light bulb recycling, and also battery recycling.
Even drug pickup would be
Yeah,
promote,
yeah, part of that as well.
protect.
So should it say our community's environment or enhance the community environment?
Yeah, that, maybe, either one.
Yeah. I just feel like it's missing something.
It's missing that word. Enhance our community environment.
Yeah. Think about that.
Financial health, the first bullet, advance MU's financial position to provide future stability. So there's like advance it to what?
Since we're looking at this over the arc of time, or over a 5-year period, we aren't really setting a particular target, although their sub-objectives could set this target or that target. So we're just saying, we as a commission want the utility to become even more financially stable than it is. At least that's what I think it's.
Yeah. So if you're already super duper financially stable, should you still advance it?
You can always be better.
Yeah, that's
Always
true.
be better. That's right.
So could Moody's be tied into that, or some sort of rating of how well you're rated?
I don't know how much you want to constrain it there. You know, you could look at it as cash, which I think is how you are looking at it for stability, but what about looking at it from an average age of assets in the ground perspective? What's the average age of our electrical infrastructure, the average age of our water infrastructure? What if we were looking to move that from, you know, a 50-year average to a 40-year average, because that makes us more stable with less main breaks or something like that. It gives more flexibility with it being a little more broad.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Under business excellence, the second one, could you strike the word existing?
I think so.
Yeah, makes sense. Could be one fair compass, you know,
Could be a better way to do
be a
something.
better way to do something, yeah.
Well, then does it make point number 2 and 3 sort of redundant if you take away existing? Could those be incorporated into one statement?
I read number 2 to be more internally focused in the operation of the business, and number 3 to be more customer focused. That's just me. Although I could be sold on changing number 3 under business excellence to continuously explore opportunities to expand service offerings that provide value to current and future customers.
Let's make it a little bigger.
The current and future
To customers.
customers, yes, does, some of the, as we talk about economic development, as we talk about glue, that gets a little gray, I guess, as far as customers go. Not someone we send an electric bill to per se, or a water bill to. And maybe that we expand service officer offerings past, like,
Other suggestions? Some good ones so far. So I think they're worn out. I take it at this stage, you would be bringing this back next month for, our part is, here's where we've left it. Our part of the commission is done, and it's now time for staff to step into it as we agree and pass this portion.
yes, and you want to see your portion as a full package next month? So I'm thinking it's going to take staff at least 2 months for us to line up the initiative, maybe 3 months to get that
Yeah.
lined up.
Yeah, I'm not expecting to see it. I think you have to bring back the package of what this body has done. Get the approval, and then start your timeline.
Yeah.
Okay. Good discussion again. Number 10, utilities role in economic development.
So we're continuing the discussion from the previous meetings. The memo I provided is kind of broken into 2 different sections, if you will. One section provides an overview of a business development specialist role. It's something that we discussed during the last commission meeting. The other section continues to provide details and examples of the 3 different legs of the economic development stool that we've been discussing, the people, place, and business. Additionally, I added some information on details about the 4 pitfalls of local economic development. They focus on a lack of a shared vision, lack of bringing everyone along, if you will, understanding or seeing the community as a whole interconnected system, and then at times not necessarily going to the root of the problem. I think this really leads into setting a vision and a goal or direction to ensure that the pitfalls are identified and addressed. And ultimately, I think this leads us back to where we began and asking the question what the utility's role is in economic development. So, teed it up there and see where you guys want to take it.
Okay. Anybody want to wade in first?
Which one are we discussing first?
Where would you like to start?
I should note that I have had, I've met with other entities. I've also had some private business, and I have more meetings coming up in the next month or so with additional private business that have either reached out directly or just there's groups that are having conversations to talk about this topic. nothing I can really share at this point, but just want to let you know that there are other engagements going on. So I'm trying to get feedback and input from these other groups to businesses and such, just to get a sense of where they see their gaps are or opportunities. Try to incorporate that into this process as much as possible.
So you've had some discussions, and what's the overall sentiment? Is it favorable to the utility being more involved in economic development, or? I know you can't share the specifics, but.
I would say that my discussions have been more centric just on the overall economic development of the community and where there's where areas are lacking, and maybe solutions overall, not specific in the utility and what our role or what we could or couldn't do. But I think, as indicated in the write-up, I think many of them recognize the role we play from the financial aspect in helping those different projects along or other components of economic development. So they see that and understand that's obviously funding is a major piece of all of this. So.
One of the things, and it's a combination of both halves of this. I really like the idea of the business development specialist role and the fact that it focuses on, in essence, the utilities portion of economic development. Because I don't know that we can be the be-all, what-all, where-all for the community of Marshfield, nor do I think we really should be. When I look at my past experience on the ADB, all four of those pitfalls were plainly evident, and not through anybody's personal fault or any issues. But boy, thinking back, I can sure see times where there was a lack of desire, a lack of patience, a lack of perspective, and a lack of nerve. And not just by the EDB, but to others that were being interacted with. So I think it's time to do something. I like the idea of having the utilities involved, but I do think that whether other entities, the city or the private sector, choose to go along, we still need to. We need to do something to help keep us viable. And I think that this might be a good start. Plus, having a person on staff that is a business development specialist. When the EDB did function well, it was when we had good support through a city position. And then it kind of didn't after we lost that. So I think this was worth pursuing.
Natasha.
So if, let's say there is a business that wants to use our certified site, or wants to maybe develop our certified site, and the state reaches out to who in Marshfield right now? Would a business reach out to a utility per se? Would they reach out to a city? Would they reach out to a realtor? Would they who is the point person in our city that someone would reach out to?
Well, generally, when those inquiries come through, they're more from a private nature, if you will. So generally, they go to Mackey, and then Mackey will work with that request, and then we'll reach out to the utility, because a lot of times those requests have certain demands, if you will, for infrastructure. We also work with city staff to request, the land and the infrastructure that the city has.
So if Mackey gets the first request, let's say Mackey says, "Oh, we can handle this," so they don't reach out to the utility business. What's the rule? This person who's working for the utility, or maybe too late in the process, or maybe months on in the process, or I'm just trying to say, yes, we need help in our city, but we can't have these, this person's supposed to do it, but they're actually not talking to this person, and then the business goes, what the heck, and just goes and finds somewhere else to go.
Yeah, I would say generally the communication works well right now between the groups, and that those requests come through. I think that many times the utility infrastructure is kind of a go, no-go between that and the actual facility. Right now, I would say the last handful that we've received, they want a facility to go into. They don't want to have to build on a green site. Because it's time to market, and that's the challenge right now because of long lead times.
So if So then this is a true question. There's nothing behind this question. If communication right now is working well, what are the pros and cons for the city having this position as opposed to the utility having this position? And I think that's what we have to work out is, what value does the utility get from this that, we don't want two people. We don't want someone working for the city doing community development and someone doing business development. That seems like a waste of money, having two people doing this. So who will do it better for what we want them to do?
What is Mackey's role right
I
now?
was gonna chime in on that. So, Nick talks about, typically that has gone to Mackey, and I think that's a historical thing. Mackey has kind of been in that role for a long time, but with no EDB for Mackey to work with, now's the time to reimagine that. There's no requirement that main point of contact be Mackey. It could be the city person, it could be the utility person, it could remain as Mackey. As long as everybody all the players in the universe know who that's gonna be, then whoever gets the lead, it needs to get shuttled over to that primary person first and quickly.
Right, but if we have a city person who's doing the same job as a business person for the utility, that's gonna cause confusion. So it seems like either we need to make sure these two people have two different roles, or we combine their roles, but otherwise you've got two people that might be doing the same thing, which is a waste of resources.
So when you have the community development person, and I haven't seen that job description, how does that compare to what Nick's got for suggested responsibilities in this role? Is it truly the same?
A lot of it is the same, but I don't have that job description like right here to compare, but I feel like a lot of it should be the same. Of going out and getting businesses and being the liaison and all of that.
So like the overview in the bottom, it does just add what you're saying is like, this unique funding source allows the utility to be selective in choosing opportunities to support, bypassing typical government hurdles. Is it part of it that we can do something that necessary government can't?
Well, I think the philosophy of the utility, while still a governmental organization, is more P&L or business focused, which I think, maybe I'm just reading into it, but it seems like that just naturally vibes with those business people that might be reaching out more easily than the government side.
I agree there might be pros to having it here, but I think it has, and one of the pros is that person might not have 10 council members calling them up telling them what to do. That's a huge pro. But we still have to make sure that we don't have two positions that are being funded, because that community development position is also going to be funded from the dividend money. So if we're using dividend money, and I don't even know if we're going to say that dividend money's funding that. That's a whole nother.
I think actually you just answered it.
Well, I don't want it to fund this.
But if the utility is funding the community development position, then it might as well be at the utility.
Maybe there's parts of this that really need to also be at the city, and I think that's what we have to really hammer out. What do we want this person to do, and how do we work? Because part of this is, that's one of the pitfalls, is that people don't work together.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it is we have a great opportunity for these different, to really clearly say, hey, your role's gonna be this, your role's gonna be this. These 3 people or 4 people are gonna meet together, and they're gonna have the seamless thing for businesses.
Just from my own education, the position that the city has that's open, is that the old Josh Miller position where you had people reporting to him? Is that what that community development, is it a director position?
Part of it is.
So I guess here's my observation. I think that as the council went through the process of when you first were looking at replacing that position, and then that changed slightly to be the acting or assistant city administrator, every meeting there was always 1, 2, 3, 5 things that would come up, and they would be pointed towards that position.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fearful that position, that plate is full beyond what it can handle. And a lot of things that we're talking here are probably things that would fall off that plate or may not even be on that plate. So I do believe that there's a need to work together, but I also think that there's a need here that's not necessarily going to be met at the city. I think when a project comes forward and says, hey, we want to build in your city, this person can help lead that process, reach out to the city staff and say, what's the permitting process, what's the steps here, I have this interested body, and that person then can carry them all the way through the steps to the ribbon cutting versus just kind of saying, all right, here's the door, you go in and I'm going to go back to my office type thing. I envision someone that's really going to help walk them through the process all the way to the end.
And so I hear that. And so to me, what would be a great meeting would be HR for utilities and HR for city to sit down and say, hey, let's not be redundant. Let's have this person do this and this person do this, and let's have them have synergy.
I think making sure the same job description or the same items aren't included in both is smart. And I think the governing bodies, as we're talking about here, and having council members in this discussion is helpful, because the governing bodies almost have to design what this development process is going to look like. Here's the main point of contact. Here's, as Nick says, the liaison, the coordinator, the person who's going to shepherd the potential prospect through the process, and everybody else knows their role. That gets to what's everybody's role in this under the 4 common failures. I remember was it Manus that was calling those economic development meetings, and they were in the old library, and there were like 40 different organizations coming to attend those things. Too big, nothing could get done.
And what was there was an old thing that was like, it had 3 letters. I forget what it was, where if a business came in, everyone was at the table.
The DRT, and those still do occur, but those are
Okay.
more from the perspective of once somebody has a plan set, and now you have the input from from us, the utility, fire departments, police departments. You'll have the inspection services, public works will sit there and talk about the layout of the facility is not going to work because there's not proper width or access on roadways, or you need more parking lots, stalls, things of that sort. So
that still happens?
Correct.
Okay.
But it really only happens, as you said, at a certain point in the pipeline. You're already, if the pipeline is from inquiry to ribbon cutting, you're some ways into it before that convenes.
Right, it's once the project's based, for the most part, so they want to go forward, but they haven't pulled out permits. You're trying to optimize their drawings, their specifications.
In today's setup, how would somebody know that a project got to that stage? Maggie?
I think it actually is led by Bryce Hembrook, excuse me, who's the city contracts for. I'm not sure what his role is exactly, but
Who has a lot of other responsibilities.
well, he's contracted in city employee.
Oh,
He was at one time, but now works.
like,
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said here. One thing I'll add though is I think this position for the utility would be very unique and offer a lot that you couldn't offer in that role. Just being intimately involved with the utility and the perspective of the health of this organization, I think it would be instrumental to make sure we're not doubling up on responsibilities, but I do see very much an advantage to having this role in the utility too. I couldn't tell you if there's enough to keep both positions busy doing very similar work, but I think if you could get those 2 positions to mesh, it would be very advantageous to the community.
this business development specialist role seems like it would be more focused on the business leg of the stool than certainly on the place leg.
Yeah, I think there's
Place leg, it would be a little on the weak side. So it's not the end all, be all for economic development.
yeah, there's about halfway down the list, serve as a central resource for some people and place initiatives. So, right, not as centric, but I think Natasha mentioned this. I mean, this is a holistic. It's a community. There's a lot of pieces to it. There's a lot of resources, and it's trying to get them to all try to align and make sure we're not stepping on toes and making sure that there's handoffs. The baton is clean as in a race, if you will. It's getting that to come together. I think I wrote it in the write-up a little bit as a wild goal is saying, do you want to increase the population? Do you want to grow the utility? I mean, I think that some of that has to be established, because if we don't have that, then it's really hard to say, all right, I'm going to do this part, but I'm working towards something. I don't know what I'm working towards. You have to give that position purpose, and the purpose is towards a goal.
So my question is, how do we figure out that goal? Because I absolutely agree. We have to have a goal. You have to give someone a job.
Well, I think to keep it within the utility's mission, it's got to be central to meters or units sold, or one or the other.
I think you had mentioned that a lot of communities do have this role, this economic development type person in the utilities.
Yeah, definitely. In a write-up a few months ago, I talked a lot about the investor.
I guess where I lead with that question is, how are these other communities dealing with two entities, or are they mostly private utilities, or do you know or have any input on how that operates in other communities?
I think a lot of them are private entities that are taking on, private utilities that are taking on that lead. Obviously, they're trying to, increase sales, increase investment for their stakeholders. I think that in a smaller community, while we don't have that side, we're very connected with the city staff and work with each other weekly, if not a daily basis, on different aspects of different projects. So I think that if the right framework can be set up, I don't see that as a hurdle by any means. I think that can easily be set up so we understand each one's roles and how the handoffs are handled. Can I ask you a question to your comment about the goal? Like when you look at it from the utility centric, I can understand that. Is this something that has to be bigger than the utility that boils down into the utilities piece of it, or something bigger?
I could live with an even bigger goal that has a utility component to it, if that's what you're asking.
Well, I wonder, as you talk about the city, we talk about Mackey, we talk about the community at large, what is its, does the community want to get bigger? Does the community want to see more of X, Y, Z?
Well, I think we have to address at some point the mismatch between the city limits and our service area.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about the utility doing economic development, I think it needs to be in the whole service area. And so, yes, what's good for the city is good for the utility, what's good, and vice versa. But we have to, can the city adopt a slightly larger than the city limits mentality or regional mentality to economic development? If we got a new 300 employee factory that came in, but it was in the Hewitt city limits, is that a bad thing? Would that be, if you set your goal based on population increase, would it be based on the city population or based on the service area population?
I mean, I think those are discussions to have, right? I think the city, we focus on who pays property tax, who's funding us.
Yeah. But I think it benefits our businesses in town to have the population grow around the city as well. So I think, if we talk about holistic, I think all growth within our service area is good for both entities. But what increases the city's property tax receipts is even better.
Can I just ask about under people? You have things that I think maybe should go under place, so I just wanted to see and clarify. So you have safe communities, which would be like public service, police, fire, ambulance. To me, that would go under place, but I could be wrong, so I'm just asking. And then you've got some housing stuff, properties to rent and own and live in. To me, housing goes under place. And then youth and high school programs, like education, the quality of schools, to me also goes under place. But I'm just asking if those should be.
This was my best effort.
Oh, okay.
So, it's all part of the stool.
Okay.
So I think there's a relationship there for all of them. Obviously, if you have a safe community, that's good for a business as well. So I mean, you could put it in all buckets.
So just from me looking at those three stools, maybe something to think about is, does the utility, sort of focus on the business, since so much of this role seems to be that. So much of place is what the city does. We do fire and police, we do parks, we don't do schools, but, so is that something where the city sort of focuses their economic development on place, and then who does people is the question.
But I think the things you just mentioned as the city's role are really, yes, they contribute to place and economic development, but they're really the basic city services.
Right.
I expect my city to provide police
Absolutely.
and fire and those things.
So we're already doing it. So we're already doing place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but pickleball courts
This place.
would be place, and I wouldn't expect the city to initiate something like that.
Though it was put in our park, so we're hosting.
Coordinated, cooperated, and the utility contributed. And if you had this business development person, well, it wouldn't generate electricity sales, so to say. Could that business development person spearhead or help navigate that through the process the same way as a new business? Is that what we want them to do?
Right, so that's why I'm saying maybe if, this is part of the discussion, but maybe we say city, why don't you focus on place? Utility, why don't you focus on new business? And then who does people?
But now we don't have a coordinated, we do have a coordinated effort, but we have so much, it's open to interpretation.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think it's that simple. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah,
'Cause
A
there's-
lot of them will cross the line.
Yeah, I agree.
Ultimately, there's three players. You have private entities, you have markets, the businesses, if you will. You have the government piece, and then you have communities. And if you think about pickleball, that's where communities came in. That was a group.
Quality of life issue.
Right, a group from the community that said, hey, we need to enhance our quality of life and quality of place through pickleballs. And it just happened that obviously it was in a park. It could have been on private property for that matter, or property that was donated down the road. So everyone has a role in different, even if it's private development, the government has a role in that as well. If it's through incentives, new roads, whatever it might be.
And we're talking about the city right now, which is important that the city be involved in development of itself, but there's a county component to that, and there's potentially a state component to that. Is the city community development person or position as it's written expected to go get money or support or coordinate with the county and the state?
Yeah,
that-
this is where.
How do we get the different governmental entities even to cooperate? This is a complex position
Absolutely.
and there's a sales and deal making aspect to it, and there's a very technical government navigation piece to it also.
And that's why I'm saying having these two people, like even our discussion right now said these all intermesh. So having two people, that's why it has to be really clear. Are they working together? Because otherwise they're both chasing the state and they're both chasing the county.
Well, and there's more players than just the utility in the city.
It seems like this position is more of a proactive engagement of trying to drum things up, and the city's by default a reactive engagement of processing. Because right now there's just too much on those people's plates there. If Josh's position was filled, it's hard to be proactive. And the relationship's a little bit different than what we already have with current big customers.
So it sounds like at the very least, we need to figure out how to get some of these additional organizations involved in the discussion. Nick, is that what you've kind of been doing already, but not ready to share? Or just not clarity on where people are at?
Their discussions just to understand what the public sentiment is as it relates to economic development in our community, and where there might be opportunities or where there might be gaps as far as structure and solution. I don't think that those conversations aren't necessarily going to lead to that in my mind at this point. I think just brainstorming right now, and I think that one of the things that we talked about a number of years ago was bringing in a third party to talk to the stakeholders and work through a process that will develop a framework on the back end and maybe goals. And that might be an opportunity to engage somebody that specializes in that to bring your common council and have them, they're a stakeholder obviously from the city's perspective, the commissions, there are Mackey and there are others that we've talked about, getting that feedback and having it go into the black box, where the black box puts out, okay, here's what everyone's thoughts are and where we should be growing, here's where the market says we should be growing, and these are the types of resources or setup that you can have to maximize the output in the long term. That might be an avenue to go. I don't have all the solutions, I'm sorry.
But this is the time to do it. Absolutely. So, yeah.
My personal assessment over the last couple of years of what's transpired, we have a lack of leadership on economic development. And some of that is everybody's really busy. Some of that is it's a bad time money-wise. But I think if there was any group that wanted to take leadership and everybody got in line with that, that would be better than what we've had over the last couple of years. And if we got a couple small wins, you might just be able to have wider discussion. But I think the first step is to let somebody take charge, let somebody try, and see if we can get people on board. I don't know that we're going to get every answer before we're ready to try.
I get the sense that we're talking about two different people, one on the city side, one on the utility side, having separate, differing roles, but yet being able to network together, not with these two people, but with all the leadership in the community, and developing additional business, keeping the quality of life here that we have now, that we enjoy. Similar things. But I like the idea of moving forward, and I think the utility should have a business development specialist on board.
Good discussion. I don't know that we're coming to any consensus here tonight, but I don't know that we expected to. We thought that this would be a multi-meeting discussion. Where do we go next? You've raised a lot of questions. It seems to me that at some point, we have to decide if the utility is going to move forward in a development direction with or without other players. And if the decision is to move forward, how we're going to cooperate with other players. We need some.
And then as a commission, we have to figure out what the goals are. And goals for the utility, and then maybe when, the conversation happens, what's the goal for those two, for the community at large?
Is that something that the city council would debate? If there were economic development going to happen in Marshfield, what goal would the city council like to see? Nick raises a great question. I don't know the answer. Does the city want to see population growth? Is that a goal? Is that a viable goal? Does more people help the city?
Yes. I think
Yes.
that would be
As long as they pay taxes.
Yeah.
As long as they're not all
All
under
they
5.
shop here, living here helps the city. I guess my input on that is any economic development, I think, at this point anyhow, would somehow have to be quantifiable. You have to, we seem to lack a vision a lot. There's a lot of the discussion that we're having right now that happens throughout the city. But the actual goals never seem to be whittled down to something that everyone works toward, this specific 1 item, 10 items, whatever, 20 items maybe on that list. It seems like everything's moving pieces everywhere all the time. I think just getting more focus would be advantageous to everybody. And if that's not working, we can change the goals too, but I think at least that's the feeling I get moving forward with economic development typically has been, we're always looking for what the easy answer is to it, and it's ever changing, and that it makes it hard to progressively move forward with something like that.
So I guess the 3 items I wrote down was trying to talk with Sarah, City, or Steve, and just kind of understand that role a little bit better. Obviously, those that you have one. Item 2 is obviously some of the other meetings that I mentioned that are forthcoming. Participate in those or impact feedback. And then the 3rd item is I'll reach out to some of my third-party contracts that do development, and we'll do consulting type services and see if they have ideas or ways to help frame where we are, and say, all right, here's how we could bring all the stakeholders together, and here are some of the deliverables that could potentially come out of some type of activity, if you will. And that way, at least gives you some ideas, some thoughts, and try to get that in front of you, so that you can, maybe that'll help steer us in a direction or gain new ideas or momentum in a different direction.
Anything else?
Just one more thing, when you were talking about measurables, you had said that, is it kilowatts or something? That's something to think about in the measurables for this job description is, do we put that, because it would relate to what the goal is. If our goal is to increase the customer base, then does that show up in the measurable? So.
Okay. Moving on, number 11, job orders.
None for approval.
Number 12, bills and payroll.
Bills have been reviewed and certified good for payment.
Motion to approve the bills and payroll by Paul, second by Natasha. Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Previous meeting minutes from the August 12th, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes? By Mike. Second by Paul. Any changes proposed? If none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Number 14, financial reports.
Included this month are the August cash reports and the July financials. Let me know if you have any questions.
Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, moving on to number 15, looking for a motion to go into closed session per Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 1C. Considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility for the purpose of discussing commission self-evaluation and personnel updates. By Nate. And Harry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll recess for a few minutes before we start the closed session. Ready to talk again?